So, what technology do you use to foster creativity? If you don't know how to use the programs shown here, Inkscape, Illustrator, GIMP, Aurasma, and Photoshop, you have a graphics gap. The graphics gap exists in throughout all of our education systems because every kid knows how to use word processing, most know how to use spreadsheets, very few know basic graphic applications, and even fewer know those with additional dimensions like 3 dimensions or augmented reality. So for example, in geometry you're taught about cubes and spheres, but the way to graphically integrate those is never even mentioned, usually because the math instructor doesn't know. For the past 20 years, we've had technologies to mathematically map natural shapes like a face and to apply those to 3D models in expressive ways. There are huge industries that are based on these, but these are rarely taught in school. So, with specific programs in mind, the Photoshop program would be used commonly for photo editing or for creating bitmapped drawings. Now, what do we mean by that? Okay, so here's a photo, and a photo editor can add a layer of color onto that to change its mood, and can further change the lighting of that to brighten parts of it, and can add yet another overlay of broken glass or transparent ice, something like that. So the end result is very, very different, carries a very different mood from the original. For bitmapped painting, this is a digital painting of Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring put in a modern setting. And you can see the very natural flow of lighting and shadow that make her her silk headdress flow and her jacket wrinkle. That's very different from the motorbike here, which is a vector drawing, which is mathematically created. So here are 3 photo image examples done in Photoshop. And let's look first at the Indian girl. And nothing has been changed on there in terms of adding objects. The little bit of hair falling over her forehead is still there in the new version. But what we see is her cheeks have been brightened a little bit by changing the contrast, and the whites of her eyes and the reflections have been brightened because they weren't captured in the original photo. For our redhead, here's a photo of a reasonably attractive person, but through the magic of Photoshop, layer after layer of effects were put on there to create a zombie from her. Down here is an original image used to create probably either an advertising or a magazine article image. So essentially nothing was added to this photo. No objects were added to create this dramatically different one. Instead, what was done is the dramatic alteration of contrast, lighting, and color applied selectively to different regions. So this is what you do with photo editing or enhancing. Now, the previous photos were enhanced with Photoshop, which costs a few $100s. There is a free alternative to that called GIMP, which I think is appropriate to introduce to kids because they can download it on their home computers and go to town on it. They don't just have to use school computers. But you see the rather natural shading of faces, of natural shapes, and in this case the sort of illusion of oil paint. These are characteristics of a bitmap painting. It can show any level of detail, for example, in this scenic painting. And while the girl violinist was probably started with a photograph, although it wouldn't need to be. Uh, all of the ethereal parts of this were created in as a bitmapped painting with the free program GIMP. Vector drawings like these are quite different, and these are created either by the commercial Adobe Illustrator program, or these on this screen were all created by the free Inkscape program that does much of the same thing. In your first hour of learning, you learn to create smooth shapes. So this smooth French curve is given as a template, and then your challenge would be to draw a red line perfectly superimposed over it by manipulating these control points. And you learn how to do it by doing it. The next step in a tutorial might be to create this simple cartoon pirate. And the outlines that are drawn from the vectors are made into closed shapes. They're filled with particular colors, and we have a cartoon. Some very simple shapes were used to create our 3D snowman. So picture the spheres that were used for his head and body. But they look 3D here. That's because instead of a color, a careful gradient was applied to those spheres. The same thing with the cone for his nose and head. In our image of the, in our portrait, you see very smoothly flowing lines, very almost mathematically perfect lines. That's a characteristic of a vector drawing. There is shading, as you see the shading in her eye, but it's a very controlled, even shading, which is created by a gradient. How is this used commercially? Often in commercial art. So most of the images of new cars or iPads or computers you've seen in advertisements are actually original drawings. And here you see the finishing touches being put on one. So this red outline is created by these control points, just like the control points in the tutorial drawing. And then it's filled with a gradient that gives the illusion of light reflecting from a curved fender. So this is vector drawing using Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape. A newer but equally creative version of the kind of art is augmented reality, and the most commonly used program here is Aurasma, because anyone from second grade on can create original, they're called auras. So how does this work? In this case, the camera that is facing this way in the iPad recognizes the Tower of London and superimposes in this case, an image overlay that would be over here, but isn't really. And as a gag, the characters are even pointing at it. So down here, we have the Aurasma program augmenting the reality of the little girl back here, who's in kind of a fighting position to pretend to fight with the augmented reality animated cartoon character. More common applications are to have Aurasma recognize any photograph or still image and replace that with a video, just like in the newspaper The Daily Prophet in the Harry Potter series. And in places like museums, this is used. So the camera with Aurasma recognizes the art, and that trigger image brings in a video overlay of the artist explaining why she did that drawing, how she did it, and what it means. So you can experience this by downloading Erasmus on your iPhone or tablet, aiming it at the back of a $20 bill. The bill will act as a trigger image to trigger a video overlay, and you'll see an augmented reality effect. So in summary, these are the programs that someone who is graphically literate understands. For photo editing and enhancing, or for bitmap painting, the GIMP free or the commercial Photoshop were used. For vector drawings, the commercial Adobe Illustrator or the free Inkscape drawing. For augmented reality, the Aurasma app is downloaded to the phone or tablet. So these are programs to get learning and become graphically literate with technology. These programs can be used to creatively apply ideas to any subject at any level in any school.